Hello everyone. I'm very excited to be sharing a series of Bible stories with you. And the person that we're going to be talking about is not someone specifically from the Bible, but somebody who wrote much to help us in our walk with God. And this may be some person you've never heard of before. But actually, this person has done much that affects your life today. Her name is Fanny Crosby. Now, we don't often hear the name Fanny, and in this case, it was actually her nickname. Her real name was Frances. So maybe you've never heard of Fanny Crosby before, but as our story goes on, I think you're going to find that there are many things that we use every day in our churches and in our classrooms that are a credit to Fanny Crosby. The story begins when Fanny was a very young girl. She was actually sitting with her grandma one night. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Little Fanny counted out loud as she brushed her hair before bed. Brushing and counting at the same time kept 4-year-old Fanny busy for a while, and grandmother was very thankful for this. 6, 7. The brush began to slip out of her hands and clattered to the floor. Fanny got down on her knees and felt the floor around her. Grandma, where's my hairbrush? Grandmother left the rocking chair where she had been sitting, picked up the brush, and placed it in Fanny's hand. Here you are, Fanny. Now keep going, Grandmother said as she guided the child's hand. Fanny was tired of brushing. She wanted to talk. Grandma, why can't I see? It was a question Fanny had often asked before, and a question that Grandma had answered a lot. Fanny, you could see at one time, but only when you were a tiny baby, Grandma replied. I've told you before what happened to your eyes. But I want to hear again, Grandma, Fanny interrupted. She leaned against Grandmother's rocking chair, waiting for the story she knew would soon come. It was a cold March night when you were born, right here in this cottage. Grandmother knew Fanny enjoyed hearing about the storm, so she always made it sound fierce. The wind swirled around our house. It rattled the windows and squeezed through the cracks. We wrapped you snugly in a blanket, and your mother held you close. Guess who wanted to hold you all the next day? Since Fanny knew the story almost well enough to tell it herself, she said, It was Polly. Yes, Grandmother said, it was Polly. She was only 3 years old at the time you were born, but she wanted to hold you. When I placed you in her arms, she asked, Can I play with her? Fanny laughed. I play with Polly now, she said, when she's not in school. Polly was Grandmother's daughter, which made her Fanny's aunt, even though she was not much older than Fanny. Grandmother continued her story. Your father always rocked you in this very chair at night. It was hard plowing the rocky ground in our fields, and he was so very tired when he came home each day. But he was not too tired to play with you. He and your mother played a game. They would wiggle their fingers in front of your face until your eyes followed their fingers. When you were 6 weeks old, you became sick with a cold. Your eyes turned red and sore, and you cried loudly and waved your tiny fists. We tried to find the doctor, but he was away. Another man, who said he was a doctor, came to treat you. We watched this man put hot cloths over your eyes. He said they would draw out the infection and wouldn't hurt you. Did I cry, Grandma? Yes, Fanny, you cried. After the treatment, though, you improved every day. But soon white scars covered your eyes. The hot cloths had injured them. And I couldn't play Daddy and Mommy's game anymore because I couldn't see their fingers, Fanny stated. But I can play other games now without seeing. I'm going outside to wait for Polly. Fanny had learned her way around the house and yard by touching every object she bumped into as she walked. Over and over she had practiced and memorized where everything was located. Now she confidently skipped across the room and stood in the open doorway. With a hop, she landed on the doorstep, and then she was running towards the stone fence. Little Fanny was learning to climb those stone fences. The fences divided all the farms in the southeast corner of New York State where she lived. And Polly had been teaching her how to scramble up the maple trees in the woods behind their home. "I hear you, woodpecker," Fanny called as she scooped up her long skirt and pulled herself onto a large rock. This was her best-liked spot from which to play a game of pretend. Tap, tap, tap. The woodpecker is in the big oak tree in the woods, Fanny thought, as she listened to the sharp sounds. Grandma said she saw his hole there. When Polly comes, we will walk in the woods and find it. And we can pick violets too. I'll give mine to Mom when she comes home. Fanny clapped her hands against the rock. It felt warm today. She lifted her head. She could tell the difference between light and dark. The sky was bright, so that meant the sun was shining. Maybe she would even be able to see the bright red glow in the sunset tonight. But that would be all she could see. After that, everything would become dark because it was nighttime. Not even hundreds of candles would help her to see as Polly could. Fanny swung around on the rock and faced the woods. The wind was whistling through the trees. Grandmother said it sounded like the ocean. Today, Fanny pretended she was a sailor. There was a terrible storm, and she was standing at the masthead of a large ship. She jumped up and felt the wind blowing her hair across her face. "I can't really be a sailor when I grow up," Fanny thought. But she giggled as she sat down. "Girls can't be sailors. I want to go to school as Polly does. Then at least I could be someone special." A dog barked in the distance, and Fanny heard the sounds of running footsteps. She twisted around. "Is that you, Polly?" "Yes, Fanny, I'm coming," Polly called as she ran up the dirt road. Fanny slid off the stone. "Someday, I'll go to school with you, Polly. Then we can come home together." Polly was silent. Then she slowly said, "Maybe, Fanny, but how will you read your lessons? You can't learn unless you can read. And you can't read because you can't see." "But I can learn if someone helps me." Fanny sounded determined. "Grandma helped me learn to dress myself and brush my hair and to eat without spilling food and to learn where all the furniture in the house is. I can walk and run and not even bump into anything. And I can hear sounds that others cannot." Polly hugged the little girl. "You are smart, Fanny. You can tell what tree a leaf came from just by feeling it. And you know all the birds just by their songs." "I heard woodpeckers today," said Fanny. "Let's go to the woods and find his tree." What the girls did not know is that while they were talking, Grandmother had been standing in the doorway watching and listening. "Lord," Grandmother whispered, "I will do my best to teach Fanny if you will give me wisdom, patience, and strength." And with that short prayer, Grandmother went inside to prepare dinner. Have you ever met someone who is blind? Being blind changes just about everything in life. Earlier in this story, Fanny mentioned that she had to learn to do things like eat without spilling food and walk without bumping into furniture. These are things that would be very difficult for someone who cannot see. Imagine trying to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or your favorite type of sandwich, with your eyes closed. Or putting toothpaste on a toothbrush in the dark when you cannot see. These things that we take for granted every day would become very difficult to do. If you want to try to understand just a little bit of what Fanny experienced every single day, Try this activity. After you finish watching this part of this story, find a friend or family member who can help guide you around a room that you are familiar with pretty much where everything is. This person cannot touch you to move you, but can only guide you verbally by telling you where to go. See if you can get around the room without bumping into anything. Thanks for listening to the first part of this story about Fanny, or her real name, Frances Crosby. Be sure to come back and listen next time to part 2 of our story about Fanny Crosby.